Welcome to Heartfelt Stories. Tonight, we follow Lily Matthews, a young woman running a small diner in Maplewood, struggling to keep the business alive after losing her husband. When a mysterious man walks into her diner one snowy afternoon, asking for a meal, little does she know that this simple act of kindness will change her life forever. Stick around to see how a surprising twist unfolds. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from. Merry Christmas. Wishing you a season filled with peace, love, and warmth. May your heart be touched by kindness. And may this holiday bring you closer to the ones you hold dear. Enjoy every moment of this festive season. The snowflakes were falling steadily outside, dusting the quiet streets of Maplewood, a small town tucked away in the countryside. The town was decked out in Christmas lights and festive decorations, the glow from the street lamps casting long shadows against the blanket of white snow. It was that time of year when everyone seemed a little kinder, a little more patient with one another. But for Lily Matthews, a young woman running a small, struggling diner, the holiday cheer felt like a distant memory. The diner, nestled at the edge of town, was a cozy little spot with checkered floors, wooden tables, and a neon sign that flickered weakly in the window. Business had been slow, especially with the new chain restaurant that had opened up across the street. Still, Lily kept the doors open. It was all she could do. Her husband, Ben, had passed away in a car accident 2 years ago, and the diner was the last connection to him, the place where they had shared their dreams of growing old together. Now, she was left alone, struggling to keep the business afloat, trying to hold on to the legacy they had built together. It was early afternoon, the lunch rush long gone. The diner was quiet, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional clink of silverware as Lily cleaned up. She glanced at the stack of bills on the counter, the numbers staring back at her with an unsettling finality. Rent was due in just a few days, and there was barely enough in the register to cover the utilities. Lily's fingers grazed the old photo of her husband, a reminder of better times. She wiped away the dust from the frame, her mind wandering. Could she really keep this place open? Would she ever be able to get back on her feet? The bell above the door jingled, pulling Lily from her thoughts. She looked up to see a man standing in the doorway, his figure silhouetted against the bright, snowy world outside. He was thin, his clothes ragged, and his hair unkempt. He looked like someone who hadn't had a decent meal in weeks, someone who had fallen through the cracks and had nowhere left to turn. His eyes, dark and worn, were filled with quiet desperation. He hesitated for a moment before stepping inside. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice weak, almost a whisper. "I don't mean to trouble you, but I was wondering if you could spare some food. I'll work for it. I don't mind. I'm really hungry." He paused, swallowing hard, his shoulders sagging. "I haven't eaten in days." Lily's heart sank at the sight of him. She could tell he wasn't looking for handouts for the sake of it. His pride was still intact, but his situation was unbearable. She took a deep breath. The diner had been empty most of the day, and her own resources were thin, but she couldn't turn him away. It reminded her of Ben's stories. He told her about the days he spent on the streets before he came back from his deployment. Broken and alone, he had been given a chance by a stranger, a moment of kindness that had changed the course of his life. Lily had always promised herself she would never forget that. "Sit down," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I'll bring you something warm." The man hesitated, his eyes wide with surprise, but the smell of fresh soup and homemade bread seemed to guide him to a booth by the window. He sat down, his hands shaking slightly as he clasped them together on the table. Lily went to the kitchen, her mind already racing. She wasn't sure how much she could afford, but she wasn't about to send him away empty-handed. She ladled a generous portion of homemade chicken soup into a bowl, adding a thick slice of warm bread on the side. It wasn't much, but it was enough to fill him. When she returned with the food, she set the plate down in front of him. The man looked up, his eyes welling with tears. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Lily simply nodded, trying to hide the lump forming in her throat. "Take your time," she said, stepping back to the counter. "I'll be here if you need anything." She busied herself with cleaning, but her gaze kept drifting back to him. She watched as he ate hungrily, his hands shaking less as he found comfort in the warmth of the meal. She saw how he slowly began to relax, as if this small act of kindness had lifted some of the burden from his shoulders. It wasn't just the food. It was the simple fact that someone cared enough to help him, to see him as a person rather than a problem. The minutes passed, and when the man finally put down his spoon, he sighed with satisfaction. He stood up slowly, walking towards the counter with a hesitant look in his eyes. He was about to speak when Lily held up her hand, smiling softly. "It's okay," she said, trying to sound casual. "You don't need to pay me back. Just pay it forward when you can." The man's eyes flickered with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. He opened his mouth to say something, but seemed to think better of it. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled note. He placed it on the counter beside her and left without another word. Lily looked down at the note in her hand. It was written in shaky handwriting, almost as if the writer had struggled to find the words. She unfolded it carefully and read aloud to herself. "You reminded me that kindness still exists. I won't forget this. Thank you for seeing me as a human when I felt invisible." Lily blinked, her breath catching in her throat. The words seemed to resonate deeply within her, like they were meant for her as much as for him. But as she looked at the note, she noticed something else, something small resting next to it. It was an old military challenge coin, worn with age but still bearing an insignia. She turned it over in her hand, and a chill ran down her spine. It was engraved with the insignia of the unit her late husband had served in during his military days. Her mind raced. Could this man somehow be connected to Ben? She didn't know how or why, but the coincidence felt too strange to ignore. She held the coin tightly in her hand, her thoughts swirling with questions. Had fate brought them together for a reason? As the diner began to quiet once again, Lily stood there, the note and coin in her hand, the warmth of the meal still lingering in her memory. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Perhaps, just perhaps, her late husband's legacy of kindness was still alive in her, guiding her through the hardest times. The days after the unexpected visit were a blur for Lily. The diner remained steady, the warmth from the act of kindness lingering in the air. She found herself looking at the challenge coin from time to time, turning it over in her hand, wondering if it was a sign. Had the man truly been connected to her late husband, Ben? Or was it just a coincidence? Still, the words in the note, "You reminded me that kindness still exists," stayed with her, echoing through her thoughts. The Christmas season had a way of stirring memories, and every night, Lily would sit by the small tree in the corner of the diner. The twinkling lights reflected on the glass, but they did little to drown out the quiet ache of missing Ben. He had always been the one to dream big, to find a way through the hardest of times. And now, Lily felt as though she was doing her best just to keep the diner open, struggling to keep afloat. She often found herself thinking back to the days when Ben and she had started this little business together. He had believed it could be something special, a place where people felt at home, no matter how much they were struggling. One snowy evening, as Christmas approached, the diner was especially slow. Lily was cleaning the counters, half-heartedly watching the clock as she wiped down the same spots over and over. She couldn't help but feel discouraged. How long could she keep this place open? Every day, it felt like she was barely getting by. As she wiped the counter one last time, the bell above the door jingled again, drawing her out of her thoughts. She looked up to see a familiar face. The man, the one she had helped a few weeks earlier, was standing in the doorway. He looked different this time. His clothes were cleaner, and his hair was neatly combed. He no longer appeared ragged and hunched. There was a newfound confidence in his posture, though he still had that same cautious look in his eyes. Lily's heart skipped a beat. "I didn't expect to see you again," she said, her voice filled with surprise. "How are you?" The man smiled softly, his face more relaxed now. "I'm doing better," he said, stepping further into the diner. "I wanted to come back and thank you properly for what you did for me." Lily felt a swell of emotion as she looked at him. His transformation was striking. I'm glad to hear that, she said, motioning for him to sit at the counter. I didn't do anything special. You did, he replied, shaking his head. You gave me more than food that day. You gave me a chance. You reminded me that there are still people who care, even when the world feels like it's against you. Lily's eyes softened, her heart warming as she saw the sincerity in his eyes. I'm just glad I could help. That's what anyone would do. The man paused for a moment, his fingers nervously tapping on the counter. Then, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the counter to Lily. I don't have much to give, he said, his voice thick with emotion. But I want you to know how much your kindness meant to me. Lily looked at the envelope for a moment before slowly opening it. Inside was a wad of cash, more than enough to cover her bills for the next few months. She gasped, her breath catching in her throat. This is too much, she whispered, her eyes darting up to meet his. I didn't do it for this. The man shook his head, a small smile on his face. You don't understand. This isn't just about money. It's about giving back. You helped me when I had nothing. And now, I'm doing what I can to help you. It's a small token of my gratitude for showing me that there's still good in the world. Lily was speechless. The lump in her throat was thick, and she had to look away to hide the tears that were welling up in her eyes. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was the fact that she had made a difference. She had helped this man in a moment of desperation. And in return, he had not only paid it forward, but had restored her belief in the power of kindness. You don't owe me anything, Lily said, her voice wavering. I just wanted to help. The man smiled, his eyes full of appreciation. You gave me more than food that day. You gave me a second chance. And I'll never forget that. Lily nodded, swallowing the emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. She felt the weight of her actions more deeply than she had before. She had been struggling with the idea of the diner, with the difficulty of moving forward after Ben's death. But in this moment, she realized something important. The diner wasn't just a business. It was a place where people could find solace, kindness, and a sense of belonging. It was a legacy of Ben's, and it was worth fighting for. The man finished his meal, but Lily could tell he wasn't ready to leave yet. He seemed to be savoring the warmth of the diner, the connection they had forged through a simple act of kindness. As he stood to go, he hesitated, his eyes lingering on Lily. I know you've been struggling with the diner, he said quietly. I just want you to know that you're not alone. If you ever need help, don't hesitate to reach out. Lily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. Thank you, she said softly. I'll remember that. The man left the diner, but not before offering one last glance at Lily. This time, there was no desperation in his eyes, just a sense of hope, of knowing that he had been part of something meaningful. That night, as Lily closed the diner for the evening, she sat in the corner booth, staring out at the snow-covered streets. The lights of the diner flickered gently, casting a soft glow across the room. She held the challenge coin in her hand, the same one the man had left with her, and ran her fingers over its worn surface. It was a small token, but it meant so much more than its physical value. It was a reminder that no matter how difficult things got, kindness was a force that could change everything. Her thoughts drifted back to Ben. He had always believed in the power of second chances, in the idea that small acts of kindness could have a ripple effect, changing lives and creating a better world. Lily felt like she was living his belief every day now, one meal at a time, one act of compassion at a time. As Christmas approached, the diner grew busier. Word had spread about Lily's act of kindness, and more people came through the doors, not just for the food, but for the warmth and connection she had created. It wasn't just the holidays, it was the spirit of giving, of paying it forward, that had sparked a fire in the hearts of her customers. Lily's diner was becoming a beacon of hope, a place where people could come and feel like they belonged, especially during the coldest, darkest season of the year. Lily knew that the road ahead wasn't easy, but she had something more now than she had ever had before, a renewed sense of purpose, a connection to others, and a belief that kindness could change everything. It was just days before Christmas, and Lily's diner was busier than it had been in months. The warmth of the holiday spirit had touched the small town of Maplewood. with snow gently falling outside, and twinkling lights adorning every street corner. The hum of conversation and the clinking of silverware filled the room as people gathered to enjoy the comfort of good food and warm company. But in the midst of the bustle, Lily felt a quiet shift within herself, a sense of hope that had been missing for so long. As she wiped down the counter, she was interrupted by a voice, a familiar voice, one that now carried an unexpected calmness and warmth. "Miss Matthews, may I sit down?" Lily froze for a moment, her hands still gripping the cloth she had been using to clean the counter. She looked up, her breath catching in her throat. There, standing before her, was the man who had come to her diner weeks ago, the man she had helped when he was starving and desperate. But now, his appearance was strikingly different. He was no longer dressed in tattered clothes, but in a tailored coat, a white shirt, and polished shoes. His hair was combed, and his posture had transformed from the hunched figure of a man who had been struggling to one that exuded quiet confidence. Lily couldn't help but blink, unsure if her eyes were playing tricks on her. She had never expected this, hadn't imagined that the man she had helped would return, looking like someone from an entirely different world. "You look different," she stammered, her voice betraying the surprise she felt. "I didn't expect you to return dressed like this." The man, now sitting comfortably at the counter, smiled softly. "I suppose I owe you an explanation," he began, his voice calm, as if he was used to being listened to. "I didn't come here to deceive you, but I came in search of something I'd lost a long time ago. My name isn't James Carter. It's Nathaniel Carter." Lily's brow furrowed. "Nathaniel Carter? As in, the billionaire?" He nodded. "Yes, I am. In fact, Nathaniel Carter, the owner of Carter Enterprises." I realized this must be quite a shock, but I felt it was important to explain myself. Lily felt a chill run through her. She had no idea what to say. The man who had been sitting in her diner, looking so defeated and hungry, was actually one of the wealthiest men in the country. She could hardly believe it. Nathaniel met her gaze, his eyes steady but filled with sincerity. "I'll be honest with you. I've been living a life of excess for years. I've accumulated wealth, power, and influence. But for some time now, I felt empty. My days became nothing more than a string of meetings and transactions. I found myself disconnected from the world around me, and even more so from the very people I was supposed to serve. So I made a decision to disappear, to experience life from a different perspective. I wanted to know what it was like to live without all the privileges I had. That's when I came here, to your diner, disguised as a homeless man." Lily's mouth went dry as she processed his words. This was a revelation that hit her like a wave. "Wait, so you weren't really homeless?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "No," Nathaniel replied, his tone almost regretful. "I was never homeless. I didn't have to be, but I wanted to see if people would still offer help, still show kindness, even when they didn't know who I was. I needed to experience something genuine, something real. And when you helped me, when you gave me that meal without hesitation, it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. That kindness, real human kindness, is priceless. It's something money can't buy." Lily sat frozen, her mind whirling. The man who had been desperate for food, the man she had thought was struggling just like so many others, was actually one of the wealthiest men in the country. She felt a mixture of confusion, surprise, and even betrayal. Why would he go to such lengths to deceive her? But Nathaniel's next words softened her confusion. "I never intended for this to become a scheme. I simply wanted to find something more than just wealth and status. I wanted to understand what it felt like to be seen as a person, not as someone with power or money. And you gave me that. You gave me something I didn't even know I was looking for. Hope." Lily's heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the weight of his words, his honesty, and the vulnerability he was showing. She had been expecting an apology for his deception, but instead, he was offering something more, an explanation, and perhaps even a sense of redemption for both of them. "I don't know what to say," Lily whispered, feeling both overwhelmed and humbled. "You could have come in here as yourself, and I would have helped you anyway. I didn't help you because of who you were, or, I should say, who you are." I helped you because you were in need, and that's just what you do when someone needs help." Nathaniel smiled at her, his eyes filled with admiration. "And that's why I'm here. Not to apologize, but to thank you. Your kindness made me realize that there's still humanity in this world. There's still warmth, even in the coldest times, and that's something worth holding on to." He paused for a moment, and when he spoke again, his tone was more serious, as though he was contemplating something deeply important. "Lily, I want to help you. I know you've been struggling to keep this diner running, and I can see how hard you've worked to keep the legacy alive. I'd like to offer you my support, financially and personally. I want to invest in your diner, help you make it a place that thrives, not just for you, but for the community." Lily stared at him, her breath catching. She had no idea what to say. Part of her wanted to refuse. It was too much. She had worked so hard to maintain the diner. But could she accept such an offer? Could she trust someone who had gone to such lengths to hide his true identity? But as she looked into Nathaniel's eyes, she saw sincerity. She saw someone who had learned a valuable lesson, someone who had recognized the power of kindness, and was willing to offer something in return. "I'm not asking you to make a decision right now," Nathaniel said, seeing her hesitation. "Take your time, but know that the offer is here, and it's real. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that your kindness meant more to me than you could ever know." Lily stood there, the weight of his words sinking in. It wasn't just about the diner. It was about the connection they had created through something so simple, offering a meal, sharing a moment of human connection in a world that often felt too cold. And maybe, just maybe, this Christmas would mark the beginning of something new, not just for her diner, but for herself as well. As the snow continued to fall outside, Lily realized that the warmth she had longed for had been right in front of her all along. It hadn't come from the money or the success she had been chasing. It had come from the kindness of a stranger who had reminded her of the very thing that made life worth living. Christmas Eve in Maplewood was a beautiful sight, with snow gently falling outside and the town sparkling with holiday lights. Inside Lily's diner, the air was warm and filled with the chatter of customers enjoying their meals. For the first time in months, Lily felt at peace, knowing that her diner was thriving once again. As Lily was finishing up her cleaning, the bell above the door jingled, and she looked up to see Nathaniel walking in, dressed casually but confidently, a far cry from the disheveled man she had once helped. "Good evening, Lily," he said, his voice warm as he walked toward the counter. "I hope I'm not interrupting your Christmas preparations." Lily smiled, taken aback. "You're not interrupting anything. It's a quiet night, but we've been busy." Nathaniel's smile softened. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation," he said, his tone sincere. "I wanted to thank you properly. What you did for me that day, it changed everything, and I've come to understand something important." Lily was curious, but didn't interrupt. "I'm not just here to thank you," Nathaniel continued. "I want to help. You've been struggling to keep the diner open, and I believe in what you're doing here. I want to invest in your diner and help it grow." Lily felt the rush of emotions. She wasn't sure what to say, but she knew this wasn't just about money. It was about the connection they had built through kindness. And now, Nathaniel was offering to help make her dream a reality. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Nathaniel added, reading the hesitation in her eyes. "But I wanted you to know that I believe in you and the work you're doing." Lily felt a lump in her throat as she looked around the diner. This wasn't just about saving her business. It was about creating something meaningful for the community. She knew what she had to do. "I've made my decision," Lily said, her voice steady. "I want to move forward, not just for me, but for the people who come here for warmth and connection. I'm ready to make this place thrive." Nathaniel smiled, his eyes full of pride. "I'm glad to hear that. I'll be here to support you." Lily looked at the small Christmas tree in the corner of the diner, the soft glow of the lights reflecting in the windows. It wasn't just about the diner. It was about the hope and kindness that had brought her here. As Christmas Day began, Lily knew that this was just the beginning of something new, a fresh start for herself, her diner, and the community she had worked so hard to serve. "Thank you, Nathaniel," Lily said softly. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Lily," Nathaniel replied, his voice filled with warmth. Together, they stood there, knowing that the true gift of Christmas was not just in the presents or the decorations, but in the connections we make and the kindness we share.